This podcast is supported by listeners like you. We're grateful for your tax-deductible donation at newthoughtphilly.org or the link in the episode description.
A practical prayer is a prayer that works.
These discussions between Reverend Bill Marcioni and Carol Lawrence dive into the details of how it works and how to work it.
Reverend Bill is a New Thought minister and the author of Practical Prayer for Real Results.
Your new life begins with a new thought.
Carol Lawrence is on a spiritual quest, finding the New Thought teaching after decades on the pulpit in 3 different traditional denominations.
I've got some questions.
Together, they're exploring the philosophy and activities that come together from many of the world's religions to create the practical spirituality that is New Thought.
Welcome to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcioni.
Let there be light.
Let there be light.
Let there be light. So Carol is intrigued by the notion of light and something that I said, did, or something. So, so let's find out.
Well, this idea of light just keeps popping into my head. And of course, your website is Be the Light.
Right.
Correct. For you to be the light. I'm assuming that, I've always assumed that that's what you were saying. But I was thinking now, in this world of brilliant darkness, how do we be the light? And, you can't, trusting the light that you see, that's probably another episode. But it's just people aren't, when somebody will ask me, how this has changed me or whatever. And I said, I notice that I don't smile when I go out as much. But the light seemed to be taken away, everywhere. Like people just are losing so much hope. Now on the side of New Thought and looking through my spiritual lens and all that, I can see something different. So how do you be the light in all of this brilliant, raging darkness?
Brilliant darkness. That's just such an evocative term. And I know exactly what you're talking about. And the first thing that comes to mind is that if you go out in the middle of the day and somebody lights a candle, you might not notice. But in the midst of the brilliant darkness, that little candle, suddenly everybody can see it. And there's always a cycle. So if we are in a darkness cycle, and that means that eventually the darkness cycle will come to an end. Now, it might be this week, it might be in 5 years, it might be in 25 years. I mean, the Dark Ages lasted for a while. And, before the Enlightenment happened, and then things got better. However, they did get. And the advantage that we have is in the darkness, it is easier to see where the light is. And in the darkness, there's also room for a lot of nefarious nonsense to go on. And and that's one of the concerns that I have now is that there are some folks that are doing things that are just completely unacceptable to me, and they're doing it in the dark behind closed doors. Unfortunately, that's kind of been the way things go for a while. So again, as that particular darkness gets brilliant, then there's an opportunity for the light to shine. Maybe there's going to be a change happening. I don't know. I don't know. But the whole idea behind Be the Light is that there is a light. And that light is shining through and as and in everything. And when we own it, when we accept that we are that light, when we are willing to be the light, then transformation becomes available. Because suddenly it's not being done to me, it's being done as me. The light doesn't wonder why it's getting bright around here. It's just it's being light. And that's the idea. And that we can nurture that aspect of ourselves. of the way we engage in the world, and internally and externally, and that actually that brings about transformation.
I think you wrote something a long time ago. I read it, that the sun is still shining, or the light is still shining. Does that sound familiar to you?
Oh yeah, even in the middle of the night.
Okay.
In the dark, in the middle of this, it doesn't change the sun.
Yeah, it's still shining. I think maybe because I'm in the midst of it right now, but this feels to me like the hardest I've ever had to work. I know you don't like that, but
Well,
I'm trying to convey an idea of talking. I don't want to say convincing that the light is still shining. It's saying, because there's such overwhelming darkness, like you said, stuff going on, and people don't trust. They want to, but there's all kind of stuff just floating around, and it's fear and doubt and mistrust, and it's all of those things that contribute to what I call the brilliant darkness. And yet, the light is shining. How do you teach, convince, or talk about even that you can still be the light?
From my perspective, it is even easier to be the light in the midst of the darkness because of the contrast. And in my observation, a large part of the problem has been old white men. And of course,
I ain't touching that.
I know, and you can't say that, but I can. And being an older white man, I don't have to be part of the problem. I can be the light. I can be something different in there. And even if I get lumped in with everybody else who's got all the privilege, I don't have to play the same game. So I have the opportunity to be part of the change and the transformation that's happening. And at some point, I'll get a cue. Okay, here's your turn to talk. Here's your turn to walk. Here's your turn to do something, to say something, to be something. And I get to step up and play my role. And we all get to do it differently. And when we're talking about taking advantage of the darkness, it's like, okay, there's stuff going on. There is absolutely stuff going on. And it's tragic and horrifying. And, I was talking to a minister friend of mine in Los Angeles. And they've had to lock all the doors to the church and put signs on all the doors that ICE is not welcome and you can't come in without a warrant, because that's what they're living in. And do I want to live in that kind of world? Well, I don't want to live in the kind of world where there's the concern of having to do that. I do want to live in the kind of world where somebody's willing to take that stand and take that step and say, not in my sanctuary, not on my watch, not with my door. And so I would get in a lot of trouble if I say, oh, this is an opportunity for the light to shine even more brightly. It's like, no, just turn off the nonsense, turn off the cruelty, and let's get back to the light.
That's what it seems to be. Just like, come on, does this even make sense to you? But I'm personally convinced that there's light in places that we don't suspect that there is light. I just believe that I just don't believe this is overwhelmingly, what it appears to be. And things have to take its course and people have to come to grips with their own conscience and all of that business. And I don't want to say the person's name because I could be wrong about them, but they did make a speech on a news show that caught my ear. They were, let's say, in the dark side of things. And they chose to step into another place. And people are saying, how do you shift like that? How do you shift like that? And I don't know what the person's heart is, but I do know what they said. They
Mhm.
said, I have looked at myself and I have changed. Now you got my attention, because that's big to come
Yeah.
out and say that. And then to say that because of being who I am, born in this country, I can criticize. I can do that. I have the right to do that.
Mhm.
And I'm doing that. Yet I'm still maintaining my dignity and where I stand. It's like I was careful not to say, oh, wow, okay, this person is being hypocritical, or to say that, I don't know if this is real, or forget everything else they said. To me, it was almost like I wanted to say, listen, the light came on and I respect what this person is saying, even though I may have a little bit of whatever, but based on the light seems to be on. And if it's not, we're going to find out anyway.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You
Yeah.
can only fake the light for just so long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Eventually our true nature shows up, especially when the lights are on.
and, and yeah, thank you for saying that word. Our true nature shows up. I think that there's a nature, there's something that's in all of us, and we react from it, depending on your level of spiritual maturity and, time on the planet around the sun. Depends on all of that. This to what you're able to say, listen, I was this, now I'm this. And I'm comfortable with this, because in a sense, you're returning to who you really were in the beginning. I don't think we came here dark,
Right.
with dark natures. I think that there's things within us that cause us to choose darkness.
Yeah.
Whether you see it as an advantage, a benefit for the moment, or all of us have made poor judgments.
Yeah.
That's why
And
I think, yeah.
it's very unlikely that anybody gets up in the morning and says, let me see what kind of havoc I can wreak. Let me see how many people I can make miserable. Let me see what a bad job I can do at work. Very few people get up actually thinking that. I mean, there's probably a small percentage, but most people, they want to be loved. It's all inclusive. We want to be loved. We want to be successful. We want to share our gifts. We want to make a contribution, and we want to be safe and secure.
Mm-hmm.
And get a nice piece of turkey at Thanksgiving dinner. Or whatever.
And I think when people react from a place that we would not consider goodness, I think there's reason for that. I'm not trying to excuse anybody, but that's what allows my light to stay on. I'm very aware of that. I think that you can be caught in situations in your life where you make poor decisions.
Oh, yeah.
And I also think you come back to yourself. I think that maybe sometimes you're fortunate enough not to have lost yourself completely. You could be in the midst of stupid and say, oh, this is really stupid and I don't know how to get out of it. But I do think that there's a pullback at some point. And that's why I believe that there's light in the DC area that we don't see. Which, and maybe that's just me being optimistic, but it's just what I believe.
Yeah, and there's opportunities for things. Even there was the handful of senators and representatives released a video, and these are all service veterans and people who worked in the intelligence community,
Mm-hmm.
and they did a video reminding anybody who is watching, specifically people who are active in the military and are working as agents of the government, that they took an oath to follow the law, and that and specifically that they don't have to obey an illegal order.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, you shouldn't have to remind anybody of that, because they all remember standing up and taking the oath, because it was a big deal. That was when the job started. Before that, you weren't in the military. Before that, you weren't working for the CIA. So everybody knows that, and it's obvious. And there is a difference between a legal order and an illegal order. And if you don't think so, then go watch Judgment at Nuremberg, because I was just following orders is not a defense. So we all have our own agency, and we have that light that's shining inside of us. And this video is just to remind people, you are the light, let the light shine. Follow all legal orders, and you don't have to follow ones that are not legal. And the part that was astounding is the firestorm that erupted, calling those 6 congressional representatives traitors for reminding people of the Constitution and the fact that they took an oath. And those are the sorts of ways that the, what do you call it, brilliant darkness shows up. And even just a little bit of light is shining through and making even the most skeptical, hesitant, judgmental people go, wait, what?
Yeah. That's why I think it's there. Light is there, because there's so many things that make us react outside of ourselves, perhaps. And maybe I'm just giving too much, rope. I've been accused of that. But I think that we're not perfect all the time. And you can be threatened. Your well-being can be threatened in a number of different ways. And you had just any number of things. Everybody, it doesn't take 100 lights to light the room.
Right.
It only takes a few. And trying to give people that encouragement that it doesn't take, whatever the vote tally is to make things different. Well, righteousness doesn't always win out. Right doesn't always win out. And it's not about that, I don't think. Because, this universe, I don't think it's moral anyway. I don't think that there is, something out there that's saying, if you do this, it's right. If you do this, it's wrong. It just depends on where you do it and all of that. I mean, it's subjective in a sense.
Yeah.
Just hold to what we know about the light is always shining. It can rain 2 weeks in a row. I'm going to be extremely unhappy because I'm going to have several bad hair days if it rains like that. But I know eventually the sun is going to come. It hasn't gone anywhere. It's just stuff happening right now.
Yep. I'm going to talk about the levels of consciousness, because it's not what you do, it's the level of consciousness from which you do it. Let us first take a break, and then we will talk about some science.
Learn to put practical prayer to work in your life. The steps are simple to learn and let you begin to get real results to create the life of your dreams immediately. Reverend Bill Marcione's widely acclaimed book, Practical Prayer for Real Results, gives you a clear summary of the New Thought principles behind practical prayer and the series of easy-to-understand steps found in the most effective prayers from religions and spiritual practices all over the world and throughout history. Practical prayer is not a replacement for your religion or practice. It's a technique to make the work you do in consciousness even more effective. The book includes 40 prayers on various topics that you can adapt as needed and use as your own. Practical Prayer for Real Results is available in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook on Amazon or at b-the-light.com. That's b-the-light.com.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcione.
And we're talking about the light. And I made the comment before the break that what somebody does matters, but the intention and consciousness from which they do it matters more. And Dr. David Hawkins has written a bunch of books, and one of them is called Power versus Force. And what he did is he determined that using muscle testing, you can get an answer from the divine, basically a true false, but for any statement or situation or circumstance. I mean, and this has been used for people to find out what they're allergic to. You clear the muscle test and you have them touch just the container holding something that might be an allergen. And if their muscles go weak, then they're allergic to it. And if their muscles stay strong, then they're okay with it. And this statement is something like, this food is healthy for me. And if it's not, then the muscle goes weak. So using this technique and lots and lots and lots of muscle testing, they calibrated the universe and determined that there is a logarithmic scale from about 20 to 1,000. Which are those levels of consciousness going all the way from shame and guilt and apathy and fear at the bottom of the scale to non-duality awareness and supracausal truth at the top end of the scale, enlightenment. And when we do something from the level of consciousness, that the bottom end, the reptilian, see it, kill it, eat it, just reaction, then it's very low consciousness, and can be automatic, and it's not necessarily intentional. When we do something from a higher level, as we get up towards that I am presence and enlightenment consciousness, our actions and our intentions and our consciousness become much more powerful. It also is much less likely that we're going to do things that are hurtful to the rest of humanity. And the interesting part is that since it's a logarithmic scale, the ones at the higher end of the scale are much, much more emphatic, much more powerful than the ones at the lower end of the scale. Like hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of individuals at a lower level of consciousness are balanced out by one person at a higher level of consciousness. So when we talk about being the light, we've got all of that brilliant darkness, which is down towards the bottom end of the scale. It just takes a little bit of additional light and brightness, a higher level consciousness coming into the world to shift the consciousness of humanity. Mm-hmm. Things not only can change, things do change. Mm-hmm. And the advantage is that when it gets really dark, then the light gets to shine more brightly. And as soon as somebody starts to get the idea that maybe they're the light shining brightly, that elevates them. Mm-hmm. I think it was Gandhi who said, be the light or be the gift that you wish to see in the world.
Yes.
Yeah. That's it. That's it. Claim your good, claim your light, and shine it.
And I think it seems to be going that way, ever so slightly. However, depends on where you look. Mm-hmm. It does. And believe me, I just really understand where people are at this point, because there are people that don't let their light shine coming out of the woodwork daily.
Oh, yeah.
And that kind of surprises me, because we tend to think like, okay, this is what we're working with. We don't really know everything that we're working with. It comes out as it comes out. However, I think about the analogy of the sun. Well, the reality of the sun, it's always shining. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that anybody, any history that I read in school, dared to try to mess with the sun in terms of dimming the light of the sun. You don't go near it. You just don't.
Right. It's because it's not going to work.
It's not going to work.
It's not going to work.
So I'm thinking, and the sun isn't the least bit worried about what we're doing. It is its own thing, and it's doing it. And I love thinking about the rhythm of the planets and how everything just does what it does. It seems like the human is the only thing in this whole cosmic ecosystem that thinks I can shift things all out of place. And I'm thinking, relax, will you? Because this ain't going to work. But I have there is somebody I know that is deeply concerned about the collateral damage. Yeah. And I said, but it's above my pay grade. I don't have an answer for that. I can't answer that. to say that it always has been collateral damage in war, that's not good enough. That doesn't make it, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a whole lot of reasons to look a fact in the face and know something better, to be able to look at darkness and say, this is not the kind of darkness in which I'm going to be living, and take a stand and move towards it. Now, you're talking about the sun, and you actually made me think of a section from the very beginning of Mark Twain's book, A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, which you may or may not remember, where this guy, for some reason, time travels back into the days of the knights. And they think that he's a wizard or something, and they're going to put him to death. And he happens to know that on this particular day in history, there's a total eclipse. And it was in the place where he was. And so he knew that at this particular time, the sun was going to go away. Well, so he used that, because he was the only one there who knew that it was going to get dark in the middle of the day, and it was going to get frighteningly so. And so he said, if you do anything to me, I'm going to make the sun go away. And they said, no, you're not. And he said, watch me. And the sun went away. and the people got a little panicky. And they said, okay, we won't do anything to you. Can you bring the sun back? And he knew how long it was going to take. He said, you sure? We can just wait here in the dark. And eventually he said, okay, let there be light. and following that, he was held in relatively high esteem. So there are ways that the darkness can be of benefit, whether it's that situation just because it's a marvelous trick of of storytelling. But when it's dark, sometimes it's easier to make a point.
Yeah. When your back is against the wall, you find what you're made of, what you really believe. And I think I told you my daughter's having a baby. And this is recent news. And the first thing and it came up in a conversation with somebody, and they were talking about all this darkness. And, I said, oh yeah, so-and-so is having a baby. And something inside just went like a little nuts, but it didn't. It went Carol. It just went Carol. So that might be the same thing. But I said, my baby is not coming into living into a world like it's trying to be created. I'm trying to say the words nicely. Okay.
Yep. You're doing a nice job.
Okay. He will not live in this kind of world. And I remember when I had my first, I was a late mom because I was late. And I thought, okay, I got to change everything, in my world to be right. I got to stop thinking crazy, and I got to do whatever and just be more attentive. And there were so many things that I used to do that I said, not doing that anymore. Not that big a deal. I'm not watching soapbox operas anymore. Not drinking coffee, not doing this. No struggle, just not going to happen, because this little rascal has got to get here in the best way possible.
Yep.
And I felt myself going back to that. This one has a name already. He or she is not coming into a world where they cannot be the best that they can possibly be. And that can be in a world that's the pits, and you say, okay, you can be the best you can be there. That's not what I mean. That's not what I mean. I was born in this country, and whether it's drinking the Kool-Aid or not, I learned the Constitution because I was in my classes. And if you came home to my mother and you didn't know that Constitution, you were in trouble. So I know the kind of world that was intended for me. I will not accept anything less for my grandbaby, which is not the first. So it's not like I'm getting all mushy, but it's mine.
Yeah.
And this one is going to start from the level playing field that all of us did, period. And somebody was trying to convince me.
Emphatic, yeah.
Somebody was trying to convince me that, oh, well, how do you know? I don't have to figure it out. That's just it. Reverend Ike said, it can be no other way. And I'll never forget, whenever he said that, nobody ever asked him to explain it.
Right.
That's just it.
Yeah.
So whenever y'all clean this mess up, it doesn't matter.
There's some optimism, especially for this country. There are two things that are fabulous in the Declaration of Independence, which you also probably should have read. The first was one of those great rhetorical tricks that Thomas Jefferson used, which is along the lines of Reverend Ike's, where he said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident." So now, how do you argue with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, there was a whole list of grievances. Here is why we are declaring independence from the British crown, and it's because the king is doing these specific horrible things that are unacceptable to us. And you know what? They were unacceptable in the late 1700s, and they're equally unacceptable 250 years later. And eventually, the same bunch of people is going to say, you know, this ain't working for us. There's some light here, and I'd rather see some light than some of this, whatever this is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and quoting you again, the brilliant darkness gives us an opportunity to let that light shine.
And it will, because it's always shining, you know? It's
Yep.
always, I'm absolutely convinced that I got that from one of your classes or something that you wrote, but it's the way it is. So how do we, I'll save that for another conversation, because there's something I thought of in high school, and I was in high school, you know, I'm telling it all, but during the height of the civil rights movement and all of that. And it lasted long enough. And I remember so much that I didn't understand. And the upperclassmen were just emphatic about certain things. And here I was, you know, this kid like around in the 10th grade. I didn't dare say anything because I didn't understand the whole thing, but I had an opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it was a lot of talk. I won't say noise because that's disrespectful. I don't mean that. But it didn't feel like people were listening. And if there's no listening, we can't come to an agreement. So we got to listen and hear each other into speech. We got to hear each other out. And I used to come up with scenarios of how we can listen and hear. Nobody ever asked me. So I didn't get in the history book. But we've experienced those kinds of things over the years, over the decades. And I've always gone back to that idea it comes back to me. There has to be a pause here so that because we can survive this. There's an answer. There's just a bit of confusion. And if we can stop and pause this, we can find our way back. And I'm at this age now, and I don't have any more voice than I had, you know, when I was 10, but I still believe that.
Yeah.
I still believe it. Like in the supermarket, this is the second time this happened to me. You know, you're coming out and crack in those carts we push, the baskets, they almost crash. That's life in the supermarket. And this wasn't even a near close. And this guy just started apologizing profusely. I didn't even know he was talking to me. And that was, and he's just apologizing and apologizing. And when it dawned on me, there was nobody else around but me. I'm looking at him and I said, it's okay. It really is. And I kind of could figure what he was the numerous things he was apologizing for. And I just kept saying, it's all right. And I just kept moving. I didn't want to get in conversation, but just hear me out. It's okay. You don't need to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Those are moments, I think, that if we could take advantage of those small moments where I don't know whether I mustered up a smile or not, but I know that I was deeply compassionate.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you were angry, you wouldn't apologize to me. You were apologizing for something you think you did wrong. that you offended me. I just wanted you to know that you didn't. So keep shopping. No problem.
There you go. Let's take another break, and we're going to do a prayer, and this is on rocking our own inner light and being the brilliance. It's Reverend Bill letting you know that the Practical Prayer for Real Results class is now available on demand. That's right, you can take it at your own pace, anytime you want. All of the information is at BeTheLight.com. That's B-the-light.com. You know where to find that stuff. The class is 5 lessons, broken down into 18 modules, and you can take them at whatever pace is comfortable for you. As you work through the process, it starts out with the theory, goes into the practice, there are experiential activities and exercises, and at the end of the program, you will wind up with an understanding of how practical prayer works, and a practical prayer for yourself that will work to create transformation in your life. And as you know, it works for everything. Take a look at the class online at BeTheLight.com. There's a sample lesson so you can see how the class is going to work for you, and then dive in. The great news is it's on sale now. You can register and save $20 off of the regular price. I'm looking forward to seeing you in class.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcioni.
We have been having a wonderful conversation about the light, about seeing the light, about being the light, about the darkness, and especially the situation in American political life lately where it seems like we have been enveloped by the brilliant darkness. And so we end the episode with a practical prayer. And this one is going to be about the light, specifically being the light. Because we can. I love talking about creation stories because we all have a creation story, and I love the fact that they all have so much in common. And one of the popular ones from Scripture is in the beginning there was darkness and void, and God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And that describes a creative process about having an idea, in this case, light, releasing the word of intention into that creative law, let there be light, and then having the law respond, and there's light. And that's a practical prayer. That's the way it works. And it works that way all the time. As we set a conscious intention, get our disbelief out of the way, we are creating a new, or initiating a new creative process, where that same creative power that creates everything is then bringing some newness about. And that light shows up in lots of different ways. It shows up as happy coincidences. It shows up as brilliant inventions. It shows up as somebody changing their mind about something that they seem completely dead set on. It shows up in lots of different ways. And the other end of the creation story spectrum is the scientific one, the Big Bang. In the beginning, there was just this singularity, this incredibly dense singularity, and for some reason it began exploding or expanding or whatever Big Banging is, and that's been going on for 14.5 billion years. And everything that exists is a result of some reaction or unfolding of that one showing up in a different way. And that includes billions of galaxies, and includes all of us and everything that we are and everything we do. And it's the same story. In the beginning, there was fill in the blank, and that fill in the blank said, let there be fill in the blank, and there is fill in the blank. You know, whether it's going to be a universe or light and the other things that are spoken of in Scripture. So we're all participating in that. So the practical prayer is to remind ourselves that that light is always present. You know, living here on the surface of planet Earth, we see it gets dark, it gets light, it gets dark, it gets light, and it gives us the impression of duality, that darkness is actually a thing. But we all have seen pictures of Earth from space, and half of it is lit up because half of it is facing towards the sun. Mm-hmm. And the other half that does not happen to be facing towards the sun at that particular time is in darkness. There is no power of darkness. There's simply a big hunk of Earth that's standing in the way of the sun that's keeping the light from being visible for that particular period. Oh, and this thing is like a rotisserie. So the light's coming back around again. It's going to. And if you're standing out there in space looking at the Earth, and the left side of the Earth is lit up and the right side of the Earth is dark, if you look over to the left, there's the sun. And the sun is not changing. The light is always there.
Mm-hmm.
So what I invite you to do is turn away from the light. Let yourself go to closed eyes or a soft focus so that you can invite in the darkness. Invite in something that's more subtle than the way that the light is showing up for you out in the world. And be aware that light is always shining. And be aware that from space, the sun is not changing at all. Be aware that the changes are all happening here in our local experience. And that's okay. And if we are shining brightly and we get down to the lit up side of the planet, we're not nearly as noticeable as when we go to the darkened side of the planet. So we have the opportunity to change the experience that's happening by being that bright light of divine love. And it's not like we need to make the light happen. That light is shining in and as and through all of creation. Everything everywhere is that divine light, that infinite energy, that love intelligence showing up in its own specific way. That same thing is true of me and of each one who is within the sound of my voice. We are all that bright light of divine love shining in our own specific and particular way. And as we open to new possibilities, as we set new intentions, as we turn away from experiences that are no longer serving us, and invite in something different, that creative law that creates everything is already responding. It's creating that newness. So I know that when enough of us have an idea of a new way for the light to be shining, it just does. The pieces just fit together, and it does. So I set the intention now for love unfolding, as good as I can imagine and even better. And the same goodness unfolding for everyone. All 8 billion of us here on planet Earth. Good and more good, pressed down and overflowing. Love and harmony and prosperity and connection and vitality and harmony and peace of mind and creativity for each of us in our own way. And I submit this idea, this intention, this invitation into the same creative law that has been creating since the beginning of time. And it always says yes. It always says yes. So I set the expectation now for that yes showing up in the perfect way, at the perfect time, as good as I can imagine and 10% better. And I know the law is saying yes, the good is coming about. And so with gratitude for all of this, I speak this word, I let it go, I stop thinking about it, and I know it's so. So it is.
The Practical Prayer Podcast with Reverend Bill Marcioni and Carol Lawrence is a production of BeTheLight.com.
be-the-light.com,
where you can find more information about practical prayer for real results.
Our theme is by Music of Wisdom. You can learn about the spiritual community of New Thought Philadelphia with daily guided meditations,
Weekly celebrations of spirit,
and Reverend Bill's classes in practical spirituality
at newthoughtphilly.org.
This podcast is supported by listeners like you. We're grateful for your tax-deductible donation at newthoughtphilly.org or the link in the episode description.